centre of all the tabloids. What do you make of this? Because you're a relatively young woman. I say that advisedly because I don't know if that's an insult. You're certainly
I'm really offended.
You're not a woman of
really offended.
Not a woman of a certain age. There's a great piece actually in the Telegraph written by Celia Walden, who's happens to be married to Piers Morgan, about the word uncomfortable. And she's written this piece going, the problem is when I was growing up, she says, we all knew what that meant. If you said, I feel uncomfortable about something, it was usually something that everybody kind of understood and that everybody would agree with. Whereas now, it's become something else. And now, if you feel uncomfortable in the company, you might sit there and go, I feel uncomfortable sitting in a room with Mike Graham. A lot of people do. And you might say, well, I had a terrible experience working with Mike Graham. But other people wouldn't. So, it's a weird situation, isn't it?
Terrible experience working with you. You used to ask me difficult political questions when I was a politician. How dare you do your job?
I remember the show we did in the pub.
I remember that. I was thinking about it this morning.
Yeah, when we first, I think it was the first show that we could do after they lifted restrictions, and it was great. But so what do you make of this story?
I mean, clearly he has acted in a way that's pretty distasteful.
Yes,
some of the comments he's made, and there's a reason he is apologising for it. One, because he knows he's in the wrong, but two, because he's been caught. Right. He's been caught out. And I was really actually appalled by his video, which was clearly his video yesterday, where he clearly lashed out in anger. He said he felt attacked and under siege, and that's probably true because when you make a mistake in a normal workplace, a few people will talk about it in the office. When you're a national figure and you make a mistake, it can feel like this entire spotlight is on you, and it is. It's been the leading story.
But he should also know better than to do that and then apologise for doing it, shouldn't he? Should have just kept his mouth
never have done it in the first place. Is the first thing. And if you're going to apologise, make it sincere. You can't half apologise and then say, oh, but actually it's just this particular sect of women who are making these. No. Because if you really think you've done something wrong, apologise with sincerity. And people may have taken a different stance, and it probably wouldn't still be in the papers today.
Right, exactly right. Let's have a look at his actual apology from yesterday.
I want to apologise for any offence that I caused with my post yesterday and any upset I may have caused to a lot of people. I wasn't in a good headspace when I posted it. I've been under a huge amount of stress, a lot of emotion. I felt very alone, under siege yesterday when I posted it. It's obvious to me I need to take some time out now while this investigation is underway. I hope you understand, and I do hope that you will accept this apology.
The global climate for the better. So this is straight off the FDA's website, and it's nuts to me when you actually read what is in Bovaer and how you have to handle it. Now, this is a product that they want to give to cows because they believe it will reduce their farts, and in doing so, we will alter the global climate for the better. So, if you read here, it says 3-nitrooxypropanol may damage male fertility and reproductive organs. So, you have to handle it wearing eyewear, protective impervious gloves and a face mask, because it's toxic, because it's dangerous, and they think by giving this to cows we are going to protect our environment. Someone's making this product, someone has to handle this product, and who knows if this product then transfers into the milk of the cow. We know that pregnant women are very careful when they're breastfeeding. They don't want substances to pass over into the baby's milk. So what's happening here with the cows? So I called my local dairy, who says they do not and will not ever feed this substance to their cows. Their cows are all out in fields anyway, out in the pasture, eating grass, maybe a little haylage if there's a shortage of grass. They're not really in barns unless it's freezing cold. They're not being given a load of hard feed. So, first of all, really important that we share and promote farmers and dairies like this, because due to labelling, we're not going to know what products are made from cows fed on this, but what we can do is know the products that are fed from cows not given this. That's the only way of knowing if a dairy says, look, we do not give this to our cows. That's the only way to know. But also it's got me thinking, we have seen that there has been a land grab on farmers with a lot of corporate interest, investment companies wanting to buy up farmland, get into farming. And what this could potentially do is start farms going more intensive under the guise, and farming more intensively under the guise of sustainability, sacrificing animal welfare on the altar of the net zero scam. And what I mean by that is, you can see that, you know, these pasture raised cows are then going to be told they have a much higher carbon footprint than animals kept in a barn, given hard feed with this product. And if people start to care less about the welfare of the animals and more about this nonsense net zero scam, we could see them make the switch to keeping animals in barns rather than the, you know, pasture ranged, free range that we've all been wanting for the last, you know, few years and been fighting for. So that's another thing that's really worth remembering when you look at all of this and you look at the nonsense surrounding the climate change scam and the net zero scam, and how, you know, these people actually think that this toxic chemical that you have all these warnings for from the FDA is going to actually alter the climate.
Straight over to my guest for this first hour. He is social and political commentator James Melville. Welcome, James.
Evening, Kevin. You well?
I'm okay, mate. Well, let's get straight into it. Let's talk about, well, you know, another day, another migration nation scandal, another milestone for Keir Starmer since he was voted in and became Prime Minister effectively on July the 5th. 20,110 migrants have now crossed the channel since then. Yesterday, 2 boats carrying 122 foreigners arrived on the south coast, taking the total since July the 5th over the 20,000 mark. No wonder Keir Starmer's reset speech this week, James, enshrining his boring 5 missions, his sacred 5 missions, will not include border control because he hasn't got a clue what to do, has he? Don't forget, on the legal front, we had 906,000 came over legally the year before last, not Starmer's fault, to be fair, and 728,000 last year. But on the illegal front, our bill for accommodating and looking after asylum seekers has now soared to £5.4 billion a year, and that's 8.3 million quid a day. The Labour Party, of course, Keir and Calamity Cooper, the Home Secretary, promised A, to solve the migrant crisis. How's that going for them? And B, very importantly, a very solemn pledge, this: we will stop using hotels, we'll reduce the number of expensive hotels we're using to save so much money. Guess what? They've substantially increased the number of hotels we're using. We're up to a massive 220 at the moment, hotels being used to house migrants. Nearly 100,000 asylum seekers applied to stay in Britain up until September. 99,790 to be precise. 28% of them were cross-channel small boat illegals. Number of migrants this country have deported, illegal migrants, since 2018, 3% of all arrivals. It's pathetic, isn't it? It's an absolute shambles. And Starmer and Cooper and his useless cabinet have not got a clue what to do.
Yeah, and people are angry about it. And it certainly doesn't mean that they're racist or bigoted. I think most people can see now that it's just not sustainable. And that's actually coming across sort of political debate, not just on one side. And it's important to raise this issue because ultimately one of the reasons we're getting these huge numbers is because migrants will know that they're going to end up in a 4-star hotel. And it's going to cost, £8 billion to the taxpayer, £8 million to the taxpayer a day. So they're incentivized to do that. And yet what we've got to have is a deterrent. And there isn't a deterrent in place. And the numbers, quite frankly, are not sustainable. You get north of 2 million migrants, net migration over a 3-year period. You imagine sort of amplifying that over 30 years. This country just can't cope with those numbers. And so there has to be not just a discussion and sort of brave talk, not just by what Starmer was saying, but Sunak was doing the same thing as well. Yet nothing was achieved. And there's one or two issues that are really sort of focusing public debate at the moment. This is one of them. And when you've got total costs of migrants and hotels per year versus the money they're taking away under the auspices of a black hole of 22 billion, such as, for instance, the inheritance tax on farmers, combined with the winter fuel allowance disappearing from pensioners as we're going into winter, obviously. You put the sum of the winter fuel allowance together with the sum saved on the inheritance tax, that figure is still less than the sum that's being spent on migrants and hotels. And so understandably, the public think, well, this is not a government that's working in the best interests of people. It's not a sustainable thing. And anyone with any logic and common sense would think that right now. And we actually need to keep banging the drum on this, because it's not about xenophobia. This is not about forms of racism. It's about the protection of what works within our infrastructures and our societies in this country. And the numbers that are coming in just quite simply aren't sustainable in two aspects: pure numbers, but also the cost to the taxpayer.
Yeah, exactly right. And Starmer's alleged solution to this escalating crisis, I mean, from day one, has not been to stop the migrants. It's been to smash the people smuggling gangs, as he keeps saying. As I keep saying, and I'm sure you agree, anybody who knows anything about the migrant crisis will tell you, it's no good just saying we're going to smash the people smuggling gangs. That's like saying I'm going to solve the drug problem in this country because I'm going to arrest every single drug dealer. Well, OK, you go and do that, Keir, because tomorrow, guess what? Supply and demand, there will be new drug dealers on the street. So you smash every people smuggling gang out there, tomorrow there will be new ones. As long as the migrants are coming, there will be people smuggling gangs. So his entire concept of how to smash the crisis, how to end the crisis, is completely wrong. His own leader, his own commander of the Border Security Command, Martin Hewitt, said just that. You don't have a deterrent. The migrants are going to keep coming. This will not stop them. You need deterrents. He hasn't got any deterrents. Instead, he's going around all these countries. His latest is Iraq, spraying money around. He gave £300,000 to Iraq. He'd say, can you sort of try and stop those migrants, in Kurdistan, coming over to Britain? Here's 300 grand. The people in Iraq, yeah, all right, thanks, mate. Yeah, we'll do our very best. Same for Serbia. He tried to do a deal with Serbia, also with Kosovo, I think, and also with Macedonia. He's going around spraying money to these countries from whence our migrants tend to originate. But, how do you go about, how would, for example, Iraq go about dissuading its Kurdistanis from leaving Iraq to come to Britain with this 300 grand? This is just performative politics. Nobody believes this is going to work, least of all him. This crisis is getting worse and worse and worse, largely because Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, refused to confront it in the only logical way, and that is to stop the migrants. Either turn the boats around, get the message out to them, you don't get to stay. We turn your boats around, or when you get to Britain, if you don't want to turn the boats around, when you get to Britain, you're detained, you broke our laws, therefore your asylum-seeking application fails because you arrived here illegally. Get that message across to people that if they come across the channel illegally, they will not be able to say, end of story, then they'll stop coming.
I completely agree. That is the only solution. I mean, it's, there's a balancing act here, but Britain's always been a welcoming liberal country. there's aspects of immigration that have been hugely beneficial to the UK over the years and will continue to do so. But that's a very different argument to what's happening in the Channel, what's happening with the numbers of net migration, what's happening in terms of legal, and also in terms of the hotel costs as well. And therefore, there has to be a deterrent on that. At the moment, there's incentives. So there has to be deterrent, and it is about what happens around the Channel and the borders once they get across. And I completely agree with you, Kevin. But this is what we've got with governments, not just with Starmer, but previous government as well. It's all about, they want to be seen to be doing the right thing, and by doing the right thing with pure words or throwing some cash around in the wrong direction. It happens in so many different issues. It happens with the NHS, it happens with crumbling schools, it happens in net zero and so on. Yet what's happening is they're punishing their own citizens with things like the winter fuel allowance or inheritance tax on farmers. And meanwhile, they're spaffing money, huge amounts of money in the wrong direction, not just on this. It's like carbon capture machines or, the net zero spend overseas, which is 11.6 billion. There's loads of this stuff going on. And so people in this country just want our governments to focus on doing legacy policies that aren't just about tinkering with stuff or spending some money elsewhere. Well thought out policies that have an actual impact on our infrastructures, on our public services, on what's happening in the Channel. We need things that people will look at and think, actually, that might work, rather than this nonsense. It's almost like we've got a bunch of politicians that is so above them, they don't have the talent or the courage to do anything about it.
Yeah.
Starmer, to me, is a weak prime minister.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He's got a massive, massive mandate. He's got a huge majority. He can do whatever he wants, but sadly, and this is the frustrating thing I find with him, he's doing everything in the wrong area. In terms of what's the obsession with net zero, what's, so tinkering around the edges of what's going on in the Channel. The budget was an absolute disaster for small and medium enterprises, and it just undermines growth. He's enthralled to the unions. None of the things that he's doing is actually going to solve any problems. But what he's going to do is create even more problems in a lot of ways, either because he's not focusing on addressing the issue, or he's creating other problems with bad policy. And we're only a few months in. We've got another 4.5 years of this. And this is why the public have already completely turned against Starmer. All these misplaced policies combined with the freebies issue and also combined with his manner. He's really unlikable.
He'd be more likable if he was in any way competent. But as I say, him and Yvette Cooper, their approach to the migrant crisis, in my view, and I think you agree, is purely performative. Going around saying, I've done a deal with Macedonia, I've done a deal with Kosovo and Serbia, now I've done a deal with Iraq, I've given them money, I'm going to persuade them to stop sending illegal migrants to Britain. I mean, this is nonsense. This is utter nonsense. It's not going to make any difference at all. And it doesn't surprise one, does it, that he's going to make this big reset speech this week, enshrining the 5 Labour sacred missions. They are securing the highest sustained growth in the G7. I think we've probably got about the lowest, actually. So I think he's going to leave that one out because he's completely failed. Making Britain a clean energy superpower. And making us all colder and poorer. The trouble with his green policies are they're incoherent. They don't make any sense. They're expensive, pointless, and under the auspices of crazy Ed Miliband, completely mad. So that doesn't work. He wants to improve the NHS. That won't work. He's already chucked 10 billion quid at it. That's how not to help the NHS. Give it more money, because the money just disappears. Reforming the justice system, well, for him, 2-tier justice, and raising education standards. So all of those things. Where is border control? Does he not understand that border control is important to people? Answer to that question, sadly, James, is no, he doesn't. Yet another set of politicians, just like the Tories before them, who just don't understand how important the migrant crisis is to people. People want it solved, and Starmer hasn't got a clue how to do it. God knows what's going to happen in the months and years to come, but they're talking about, with his policies, we might end up with 80 million people here within just a few years. So it's all a disaster.
It's only Tuesday, Peter, but I feel like sighing already. It's just kind of like a... Keir Starmer, you know what we should do? Let's kick it off with Keir Starmer appearing yesterday on ITV, as I say, in front of two former children's TV presenters, not exactly Panorama, as it used to be known. Let's have a look at what he had to say.
Look, I remind myself that very many people didn't vote Labour at the last election.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised that many of them want a rerun. That isn't how our system works. There will be plenty of people who didn't want us in the first place. So, look, what I focus is the decisions that I have to make every day.
And it's a bit like opposition. But surely you want us, the public, to trust you, to like you, to think he's the man for the job, he's doing what he needs to do. Your approval rating is lower than Nigel Farage's right now.
The thing is, if you make your mind up, as I have done, that we're going to do the difficult things first, then I think it's inevitable that people do feel they're difficult decisions. I mean, I understand that.
He keeps talking about difficult decisions. Andy Peters there about to hand him a box of crayons and go, would you like to draw your favourite animal? I mean, you know, is this now the level of discourse that we've got in this country?
I'm really surprised that Andy Peters didn't give him the phone number to ring in to win 100 grand,
yes.
200 grand, because that's Andy Peters' job in the morning on that channel.
Although he did say, apparently, Keir Starmer, that he does, he will enjoy if they would like him to come in and do a bit of cooking. And apparently he says, I love to do a bit of cooking on a Saturday, and his favourite cooking, his sort of signature dish is a ham pasta bake.
Oh.
Which
this kind of Me Too feminism that we've had over the past few years, the thing that concerns me about it is that it infantilizes women and it destroys men. So it encourages women to see themselves as the victims of jokes and banter instead of just taking the initiative in the moment to tell the bloke to shut up, which is what we've tended to do in the past. And also can destroy men on the basis of accusation alone. It looks like Gregg Wallace's career has gone down the toilet. Neither of the sexes benefits from this unforgiving culture.
The UK on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This comes in from Chris in Brighton. I was talking about, watching American TV as a kid and how, teenagers and the like had phones in their bedrooms with long cables and stuff when we didn't even have a phone in the flipping house. Chris says, spoiler alert, those were just television shows that you were watching. In real life, most Americans would watch the same shows and also wish they lived like that. I'll tell you what it was, Chris, because I think you're probably right, but I think it was middle-class America, what they were showing. Because I've spoken to Americans of the same age as me, and the ones that came from, you know, certain backgrounds and go, yeah, sure, I had a phone in my room since I was 8. You think, wow, that's extraordinary. But I think Chris in Brighton is right. The average American didn't have any of that stuff. But that's what TV used to do. You know, if you watched through the prism of... Remember sitcoms in this country in the 70s and to the 80s to that extent? There were always middle-class families, you know, where... You know, I don't know, The Good Life or something. You know, somebody would come home from ever-decreasing circles, or these kind of programmes. They'd always have a decanter of whiskey in the house. The vicar used to come round for tea. These were not... I don't know who was writing this stuff. But these were hugely successful programmes, of which 90% of the audience could not identify one iota. But I suppose they were vaguely funny. Charlie Rowley is still with us. Sorry, Charlie, I took a bit of a diversion there down retro lane on our programmes. A bit of breaking news, by the way, and it ties in with our next subject. The Bake Off Christmas, not the Bake Off, the MasterChef Christmas special has been pulled by the BBC. We're just hearing that. But he's going to be kept on air, Gregg Wallace, and the other programmes for the other bits and pieces. Let's remind ourselves of what Mr. Wallace said by way of an apology yesterday.
I want to apologise for any offence that I caused with my post yesterday and any upset I may have caused to a lot of people. I wasn't in a good headspace when I posted it. I've been under a huge amount of stress, a lot of emotion. I felt very alone, under siege yesterday when I posted it. It's obvious to me I need to take some time out now while this investigation is underway. I hope you understand, and I do hope that you will accept this apology.
So there it is. MasterChef stays on air, but not the Christmas special, Charlie. How are you going to get through the festive season without it?
Oh, I think I'll survive. I think I'll just about get through it without Gregg Wallace. But you know what? This is... in a funny way, I mean, I was prepared to come on and sort of, lambast the decision already to say, look, he shouldn't be on screens because the justification of the BBC, well, there are two ways of looking at it. Even by Gregg's own admission, if he's now saying, I need some time out, I need to, even though there are people that he's clearly offended and there's a reason why he's being taken off television, there is still a duty of care, you always hear that, to everybody who's on television, regardless. So, the idea that Gregg Wallace, if he's said he needs to take time out, will be appearing over the festive season, I think would just be wrong for him, certainly wrong for the people that he's obviously offended and upset, and whatever other allegations there are that are pending. So it shouldn't have been on anyway. But in a funny way, if there was ever going to be an episode that should have been shown, because the BBC was trying to justify that it's not just about one individual, it's about all the other contestants as well, you would have thought, actually, if there was one episode that they would air, it would be the Christmas special and not the other ones in between.
Yeah, you might think, just stick it on at Christmas and then have done with, and then, we can all take a rethink after that.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I agree with the decision that he shouldn't be on at all, but it seems a bit sort of bizarre that they're sort of just pulling that one, it seems, if that's
It's
right,
a difficult one, isn't it? If somebody makes an allegation, then straight away the argument is you take that person off until you've established... Now, that does seem, a little unfair in some respects because, you're almost being found guilty before you've been found guilty or not guilty. Just by dint of because of the high-profile nature of that business, they pull all your programmes, and that's it straight away. People go, well, he must have done something wrong.
Yeah, I think it's it's always the follow-ups, I think, as well, where one person, obviously, if they felt offended by something, or if they feel as though something totally inappropriate has taken place and they speak up, that's one thing. And obviously the BBC or any other broadcaster would have to go and investigate that. But if that becomes public and all of a sudden you then have a sort of snowballing effect of other people coming out, then actually it becomes an issue where I don't think you're left with much of a choice other than to say, all right, we've got a series of allegations of inappropriate conduct or misconduct, so we've got no choice but to pull that individual off onto one side whilst they investigate.
Let's move to this story. Junk food ads will be banned before 9 p.m. Yes, this is and online in a bid to tackle obesity. Unfortunately, it means, Charlie, we'll get no more stunning commercials like this one.
Hey, look at there. Didn't I tell you it was finger-licking good?
Kentucky Fried Chicken. If you want Kentucky Fried Chicken, you have to visit me.
That is the Colonel. That's an ad from 1969, Charlie, and we've been munching on his chook ever since, to coin a phrase. Listen, I don't know how where you are on the junk food stakes, Charlie. I'm sure you a late-night Mackie D or a kebab every now and again. Would that be reasonable?
Well, I think one of your producers must have been peeping through my net curtains, because I had one of those last night. Very late.
You had a what last night?
I had a KFC last night.
Did you? Well, what about that?
Paid me a visit.
The Colonel came round personally. The spirit, at least, of Colonel Sanders. You see, I think you can't beat KFC pound for pound when it comes to takeaway food.
Well, funnily enough, I'd never had, this might be a revelation to you and your listeners and viewers, but I've never had a KFC until I moved to where I currently am now in Putney. And I don't know if I can have.
You'd never had it until when, sorry?
Until earlier this year.
That was your first soiree into the KFC world.
It was, and I'm hooked. I am hooked.
You're a chicken addict. I love it. So how had you swerved the Colonel's chicken parlour all of these years, Charlie Rowley?
Well,
you went to university, you worked in Westminster, you'd had late nights, you'd worked with Michael Gove. If anyone likes a bargain bucket, it's Michael. So how did you avoid it?
Well, you're right. At uni, I was certainly surrounded by other late night food outlets. A particular Ronald McDonald was.
So would that have been your go-to? Would it have been a Ronald?
Yes.
Yeah. And have you now crossed the Rubicon to the Colonel?
I've grown up, yes.
Yeah. It is. It's a rite of passage, I'd like to think. 3 pieces, large fries, barbecue beans. I mean, that's all you need in life. I mean, not much more than that.
It is, but now, the high streets, there are options as well. If I fancy Five Guys every now and again, which, I know that's a bit more fancier, but
well, I'm not going to judge you on your personal life. Let's stick with food.
It wasn't just the Colonel that came round.
Listen, I'm glad you've sampled the delights of Colonel Sanders. Charlie, thank you as ever. We didn't even get to talking about the ban itself. Adam, our producer, has just said in my ear that KFC in Australia is superior. Now, I'm an Australia-phile, whatever the phrase is. I had KFC in Australia a lot of times. I thought it was a bit dry. I'm just saying, you see, one of the reasons I like the finger-licking good thing down there at the parlour is because it's a little bit greasy. And when you order one and it's dry, I think I've got a moody KFC on my hands. You've got to have that juicy kind of grease coming out. Some people say, I don't like all of that. That's part of it. And that beautiful secret recipe that covers the poulet in a beautiful way. Everything about it is stunning, although I don't know why they changed the recipe of their chips quite recently. That was a bit of a mystery, but there you go. Banning ads, I'll just say it because we ran out of time with Charlie there. I don't think banning ads will do a single thing for childhood obesity. I think it's as simple as that. My kids are 10 and 6. They are painfully aware of all that goes on in the takeaway world because they see it around them all the time. You can't miss it. The golden arches are there for all to see. The Colonel's chicken parlour lights up like it's literally heaven, not the nightclub. I'm talking about, the place where you go afterwards. And an ad online is not going to make a blind bit of difference, I sense. We'll take your thoughts on that as well. 0344 499 1000. I want to go back to the main question. Where do you think the United Kingdom's affinities are? Is our affinity with the United States or is it with the EU? And I'm talking not culturally. I think culturally we are probably right in there with the United States. That's sort of irredeemable, really, the common language, if nothing else. But in terms of trading and our future and our successes, Is it with America? Is it with the EU? 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Lots of comment coming in here. Robin Sussex, the lyric you mentioned was Holly Johnson, Americanos. It was, indeed. The land of the free where you can be what you want to be. Holly Johnson, what a supremely underrated talent Holly Johnson was. You know, formerly of Frankie Goes to Hollywood. The Power of Love, one of the greatest love songs ever written. And Americanos is an absolute beauty. Spotify it if you want. Check it out. Let's continue. We move to that question, where our affinities lie. Where's the UK's best future, the US or the EU? Keir Starmer insists Britain doesn't have to choose between closer ties with Donald Trump's US and the EU. This is his first major foreign policy speech. He told the Lord Mayor's banquet in London both were needed for economic prosperity as well as security. He also made an overture to Donald Trump to keep up support for Ukraine, suggesting a negotiated settlement is the most likely way to end the war. Let's speak with Peter Wilding, Senior Political Advisor to Tobias Ellwood, Chairman of British Influence. And I know everybody says this, Peter, when you come on, the man that invented the word Brexit. I'll never get over that. I mean, that's going to... I won't. That's going to... It's a shame you couldn't copyright it and all that stuff, but... Do you remember where you were? And you too, Peter. Do you remember where you were when you first said Brexit?
Wrote an article 14 years ago. Yeah, no, hang on, 2012. And it was during the Euro crisis, the Greek Euro crisis. I said, look, I think we've had this conversation many years ago, Ian. Grexit was the word, wasn't it? So I just said that...
this was when the Greeks were having all the hassle. Is that what you were referring to?
That's right. The Greeks were having all the hassle. And an American banker, I think, said, this is going to end up in Greek exit from the Euro, Grexit. So it came to me just to write an article, quite by accident here. And I just said, oh, this might be followed by another sad word, Brexit. And the whole story is, I've forgotten about it. And 4 years later, the Oxford English Dictionary gives me a call and said, we've tracked down, and you are the first fella to ever invent it. So that's my claim to infamy.
I remember somebody, you know, a producer, writing it on a cue for me, thinking, what is this word, Brexit? What is it? Bearing in mind, it didn't exist, really, other than, as you say, you'd written it in a piece. And then, of course, it's now, you know, a regular part of vocabulary and a great battleground, still to this day, 8 years after the UK voted. Look, we trade more with the EU, Peter, by a country mile. Collectively with all the countries, we export, we import, we do more business there. Is that the only yardstick that a country needs to look at? This is who we trade with more, so clearly the EU should be our best friends, and we'll continue to, you know, clearly have hopefully a fruitful relationship with America as well.
Well, Britain has always had a very ambiguous relationship with the United States. After all, the United States sort of crucified the British Empire. Certainly in the Second World War, and definitely after Suez, they were the grave digger of our British ambitions, global ambitions. So we'd always have this kind of strange father-son relationship with the United States. The son grows up and basically ousts the father from global leadership. However, there is a continuity about everything. I mean, I'm writing this book right now called The 10 Rules of Power, and it's quite amazing that the liberal, constitutional, democratic world started, not in England, it started in the Dutch Republic in the 17th century. They're the first people who created the idea that absolute monarchies were rubbish and we should have constitutions and democracies. And then, as your listeners and viewers will remember, William III comes over, conquers Britain. We become a liberal democratic state, and then the United States basically becomes our successor. So we've always had a strange relationship. George Bernard Shaw put it beautifully in, so, you know, two nations separated by a common language.
Yeah.
The last, final point, our last dealings in sort of political terms with the United States has been as a bridge. We were sitting in the middle between the United States, global superpower, and the European Union, and we could interpret both these people to each other. And of course, Brexit demolished that bridge. So to quote another great quote, actually, Britain has lost an empire and has yet to find a role, and we're now seeking it. And it's quite interesting to see how people are struggling with that right now.
It's going to be interesting. I mean, there's certain inevitables. Obviously, we do keep trading. We export, we import, etc. That doesn't change. I guess it's to what degree, right? And whether the deals that we have are as good as they once were. We've never signed this new trade deal with the United States that was talked about after Brexit. I think Liz Truss said she was going to make it happen. There was all these sort of micro deals, state by state, which, as you will know, Peter, aren't really deals at all. They're just statements of intent that we would happily trade with the UK if that situation arose, which in Utah or Iowa, it's probably not going to arise in an autonomous fashion. So there was a lot of talk about it. I wonder whether anything will change at all under Donald Trump, unless the tariff thing comes in.
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned trade, and sorry, I didn't answer your first question appropriately. I think we look through the prism of geopolitics in our country through trade. I mean, trade's important, of course, but values are important as well. And trade shouldn't be the only way we look at relations. I mean, the United States, plainly, after Brexit, the Brexiters wanted a trade relationship, a free trade deal. That hasn't come. And I think the Starmer point, which is why we're here, is it's really kind of cop-out, Ian. It's kind of muddled through situation. Oh, we don't have to choose. Attlee didn't have to choose. And it's rubbish. Attlee did have to choose. In 1950, the Korean War broke out. Britain had to choose to send troops to Korea. That stopped Ernie Bevan, the then Foreign Secretary, from doing his big foreign policy, which is to create a big relationship with Europe, a colonial relationship with France and Africa, and an equal relationship with America, and that was blown out of the water. Suez blew the relationship out of the water. Iraq blew the relationship out of the water with Europe in that case. So trade is not the only thing. And I think Starmer saying we won't have to choose. You're going to have to choose, Starmer, but it's not going to be your choice. These choices will be forced upon you. So consequently, if Trump says we're imposing a 20% tariff on the European Union, that is a choice.
Yeah.
And the United Kingdom is going to decide, well, hang on, we're going to have to negotiate with the European Union now because we do not want to have an equivalent 20% tariff if we then choose to associate with the United States. And the United States are highly likely to play the United Kingdom off against the European Union. It's going to be power politics. And the sad truth about Keir Starmer is that he might have been a great DPP, Director of Public Prosecutions, but he's no politician. And I think it was, somebody said in the Times today, he's bland with good intentions. And
well, he's certainly bland.
He's certainly bland, Ian. And the problem is that bromide won't stand the test of the next 6 months because power politics will intervene. And the European Union will say to us, right, you're going to make a choice. Are you going to stand in the middle? And of course, the immortal line, if you're in the middle of the road, you're going to get run over.
True. Listen, Peter, thank you for your time as ever. He's Peter Wilding, Senior Political Advisor, formerly to Tobias Ellwood and others, Chairman, British Influence, and creator of the word Brexit. It's going to be, I mean, if you read between all of the lines, that there is this, great place we arrive at with big stories like this when so many experts come out of the woodwork and start talking and give you impart their wisdom on what is likely to happen, and Trump's going to do this and he's going to, probably fire both barrels to the likes of China and to Europe as well, and will be caught up in all of that. Nobody really knows, not yet. I would be surprised if Donald Trump suddenly pitched up as president and day one lobbed all of these big tariffs on. There is potential damage for his own economy if he does that, affordability for American citizens. So it's not a straightforward case of, I'm looking after my own country. That notionally it makes sense, but in reality that could be really tricky for Trump. So we don't really know. I'm more interested in the kind of the spirit of the question as to where our affinity should be. And I guess there's probably a part of me somewhere in my lizard brain that is harking back to the Thatcher-Reagan thing. Maybe it's that. 0344 499 1000. Who is best for the UK's future, the United States or the EU? Our lines are open. This is Talk.
Starmer might be on the brink of giving them away.
Yeah, well, I mean, no surprise here, right? This is a government that places its own ideology ahead of Britain's national interest. You know, the most visible example to date has been giving the Chagos Islands away, a huge strategic error, annoying our greatest ally, America, hugely, and giving essentially carte blanche for China to now become dominant in that region, you know, simply to advance an ideological motive.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
So what is going on here? This comes in from No Name Given. The only reason we send so much produce to Europe isn't because they're the end user. It's because Europe took all the business from our port. So now we have to send everything to Rotterdam, and it's classed as trade with Europe. But it's not the case. It's only because it has to go to Rotterdam to get elsewhere in the world. Does it all go to Rotterdam? Surely not all of our spuds go to Rotterdam. I don't know. I can't comment. This in from Don in Chelmsford. Ian, what we could really do with is a Prime Minister who actually likes the UK and puts us first. Unfortunately, Labour hates the United Kingdom. We need a Trump. Jamie in Hornchurch, the United States is on the up with businessman Trump back in charge and our great allies, so it's obvious the choice to support for our future. The EU is a failing socialist experiment despite being a trade endeavour initially, with France and Germany's economies going down the pan. So obviously the failing socialist Starmer is going to buddy up to Brussels in 5, 4, 3... and on it... We'll play you that little clip a little later in the programme. Thank you, Jamie, for that. Let's go to your calls. Tarquin down in London. What have you got for us, Tarquin? Good afternoon.
How the devil are you, sir?
I'm all right. I'm good as gold at this end. What's going on?
51st state. England must become the 51st state of the United States. We are much more akin to them. The failed European quasi-communist experiment has, in its death rattles, Starmer, he's the last of the old order who wants to retain the globalist pathetic experiment. Our true global Brexit that we wanted after 2016, as you said, that has been kept from us. This is our opportunity. Trump and Farage, that's our opportunity to make good all of the promises that we, the British people, not the British establishment, two entirely different things, Ian. This is our chance. I hope that we can grasp it. I don't know how we're going to do it peaceably, but we need to do it now. Now's our chance, and I think we should go for 51st state, and it should be England. Scotland, Wales and Ireland, they can decide what they want to do, but I think England needs its own voice again, Ian, and this is our chance.
How would we... I mean,
but that's what I want.
No, I get it. There's a couple of points. I mean, I'm not sure whether we could divide the UK up, but I take your point. On the wider question, though, Tarquin, this is all dependent on whether Donald Trump has a similar view of the UK. I don't know whether he's got any inclination to us. I'd like to think he has, but would he look at us as being, oh, yeah, I'm going to do deals with all these places, but the UK, they're my pals? Does he have that view?
Possibly, but I'm very mindful also in this positing this case that there's this huge BRICS thing going on. You're aware of this, aren't you, Ian? The whole Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, etc. And then that is growing massively. They've got their own new reserve currency backed by, I believe, it might be still gold. So there's a whole new thing that he will be considering, that when we look at Britain, you know, and they're like the Reagan and Thatcher sort of romantic, it's way bigger than that now, Ian, way, way bigger. You know what I mean? If we're going to talk about this seriously in the big scale, what are we trying to do? We're trying to have a future for our children, to get rid of this cost of living crisis. It's pathetic. The whole immigration thing, we need to sort that in a grown-up way. It's all pathetically infantile, and all the institutions we have to deal with, either they don't exist or they're anachronistic. They're not fit for purpose. We need a new kickstart. The only place we're going to get it is by getting closer to what the prospect of the Trumplicans are. You know, the Trumpism and MAGA. And we become mega, make England great again. That's what we want.
There it is, make England great again. Thank you, Tarquin, for that. that. Patriotic stuff. I wonder whether... I mean, I would extend that to the whole of the United Kingdom. I don't think we could suddenly start trading just as one part of the UK. I don't think it works like that. There's too many other sort of factors in there anyway, even if you had a sort of separate parliament, as it were. I mean, the breakup of the UK has always been a little bit mysterious. I'm all for having sort of separate bodies and mayors that can make localised decisions. But we're a country the size of a postage stamp with 4 parliaments in it, and I find that a bit weird. But, you know, that's a democracy, that's what we live in currently, and that's how, you know, the powers that be have shaken it up over the last few years. One here from Keith on the programme that was on Channel 4 last night about Benefits Britain scandal. What an eye-opener, says Keith. No wonder shirkers on long-term sickness benefits will not take jobs as they're getting more in benefits. The government needs to address the benefit system in order that those people who go to work every day are earning more than those on benefits. It's a good point. Now, I'm told, I say this in defence of, you know, because I think Fraser Nelson, who we had in last week, he was on with Julia earlier talking about this, that to get to that highest tier of sickness benefits, you have got to jump through some hoops, if you can jump at all, of course. So I don't know how many people can easily get to that place. What I do know is, and Keith is quite right, that there are, and Fraser Nelson told us this, you know, it's not that hard for your doctor to sign the initial kind of form that gets the ball rolling. That's where perhaps the problem is. Lorraine is... Where are you, Lorraine? It says Wales here. That's a big old place.
Swansea.
You're in Swansea. Glad to hear it.
I'm in Llanelli. Have you heard of that?
I know it, yes. Anyway, what have you got for us?
Well, Starmer, right, this programme drives me up the wall. And I watch it every day now. And every day I end up screaming at the telly. My husband said I shouldn't watch it anymore.
That's all right, I understand that. It should come with a health warning.
I think I should sue you.
For over-animation and reaction. So what do you make it? Go on, Keir Starmer.
He's one step away from giving Trump the finger.
Do you think so?
It's so offensive.
Yeah.
Like saying, oh, yeah, well, we decide whether... Trump's going to get no special favours from us. Well, it's the other way round. It's Trump that would be doing us a favour. We are not a big power. We've got no army, thanks to the last few governments. We've got no defence. And if Russia tries to hit us, we would hope that Trump would stand with us.
Do you think he would? I mean, that's the question. There's a lot of people over here that like Donald Trump, but does he like us?
I hope so, because I like him. I know that my opinion don't really matter, but...
it does. All of our opinions matter.
I think a lot of people do, actually, with everything, with the trans and with everything else. It's like his idea of a government is an old-fashioned government. Like we used to have. We'd have had with Thatcher. She wouldn't have had no truck with men in girls' changing rooms.
Well, no, I don't imagine she would.
Reminds me of her.
Yeah.
And
listen, I hear it. Listen, Lorraine, we will have to wait and see what happens. In the meantime, keep shouting at the radio and the telly, because it's actually good for your health, I promise you. Thank you to Lorraine in Wales. Back to that issue of fast food and takeaways. They're going to ban the ads before 9 o'clock. It's one of those stories you see every now and again. You see one of these. Sean in Grimsby says, Ian, you're off your head, mate. Burger King every time. But really? I have to say, a Whopper is a pretty tasty bit of kit. Ultimately, the Whopper is probably better than a quarter pounder, but a quarter pounder is still rather nice. Yeah, I'm talking about a McDonald's quarter pounder. But yeah, Whopper with cheese. Yeah, I'll go with some of that. Not the fries though. Burger King have never mastered the fries. Crazy. Lisa says, Ian, are you eating halal KFC? Apparently not. I checked it out. There's a map you can go to. Well, that's what somebody told me. More from you on the way. Who is best for the UK's future? The United States or the European Union? We'll talk about that, the fast food ban, all the other stories we've got rumbling along as well. We'll talk more on all of these in a few moments' time. Our number, 0344 499 1000. This is Talk. Let's get the headlines at 2 o'clock.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, good afternoon. Welcome back. 3 minutes after 2 o'clock, right here at the home of Common Sense. Coming up, Keir Starmer warning Donald Trump he will not side with America against the EU, despite calls from the president-elect's allies to choose between Brussels and Washington. We're throwing out the question notionally, who is best for the UK's future? Is it the United States or is it the EU? Also, Labour could cap political donations at £100,000 after it emerged that Elon Musk allegedly wants to hand Nigel Farage's Reform Party $100 million. This is after he bankrolled Donald Trump's White House return, of course. Would he do that? Well, he's got the wonga, hasn't he? And the BBC has pulled MasterChef's Christmas specials after presenter Gregg Wallace was accused by multiple women of inappropriate behaviour. This is just turning into a soap opera right now, isn't it? There's a lot of, well, I think I saw this, and I think he was a bit that, and I don't know whether there is. And I think this is, I was talking to my other half last night, she slightly disagrees on this, that even the inappropriate behaviour, even if it wasn't sort of physical, doesn't mean to say it's not bad. Well, we all agree with that. It's a terrible look for Gregg Wallace. This is, at the moment, from what we know, it's a bit more Benny Hill than anything, but it's clearly been, you know, a bit upsetting for some. But I'd imagine that isn't very nice. But does he lose his career over this? We'll wait and see. Everything you need to know and all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. This comes in from Michelle. We will lose our sovereignty of our military when Trump calls out European countries for not paying their NATO bill and threatens to stop paying for all the poncing countries. I remember one of the greatest things I've ever seen, actually, Donald Trump. I'm not naturally a Donald Trump fan. Nobody should be a fan of any politician, by the way, of whatever colour. But you can say, well, I think that leader is, you know, greater than that leader. We should always, our default position should be not to trust any of these people. But one of the greatest things I have ever seen was the time that Donald Trump, and it was on camera, had a pop at Angela Merkel for not, you know, paying their way when it comes to NATO. You know, you guys have got her up it. We're paying too much in the United States. And the United States are paying disproportionately more. I thought that was great because you never see that. We always have this diplomatic language where, you know, they stand together at a press conference and they're all in agreement and there's no disagreement and there's never a moment where one says, do you know what? Actually, you haven't been playing ball for the last few years. Never happens, really. But it did then. I thought that was a great moment. It was a moment of real brutal honesty from a politician. You just don't see it. Jen says, mega, make England great again. I'd never thought it's mega. That kind of works, doesn't it? Neil, a similar point was raised in the last hour. The figures of exports to Europe are misleading, as a lot of our exports go to Europe as a staging port to go globally, but it counts as an export to Europe. Good point. I think we still trade more with the EU than we do with the United States, but that's not a reason to, you know, to reinvigorate our relationship with the EU. And in of itself, it doesn't mean to say that everything, therefore, is more beneficial. It's just a bigger number at the end of the year. But there are exceptions, as Neil and others have pointed out. Thank you for that. Let's continue and look at some of these big stories. Joining us now, Oscar Redrop, former SPAD, special advisor to Boris Johnson when he was Prime Minister. Oscar, good afternoon to you.
Afternoon. How are you doing, Ian?
Good. Nice to have you with us. How is Boris these days, by the way? Are you still in touch?
Not as much as we previously were, although it was quite an intense period of time, admittedly, when he was in number 10. So, yeah, I think, you know what? I think he's actually leaning into and probably relaxing into his role of, you know, commenting mainly, I would say, on global issues. I think he wants to stay out of the kind of UK politics, Punch and Judy stuff as much as possible. But, you know, when I've seen interviews with him recently, he feels a little bit like the glint behind his eye, that X Factor Boris has kind of come back a little bit, actually.
Do you think this is... Yeah, I was about to say... Sorry to interject, Oscar. I was about to say, do you think his métier was always in this field rather than as prime? So, a commentator once said, as I'm sure you'll remember, that Boris liked the idea of becoming the Prime Minister. He liked the idea of saying he was the Prime Minister. He just didn't like the bit in between. Is that true or is that unfair?
I think, look, it won't surprise listeners and viewers that the devil in the detail sometimes perhaps escaped someone like Boris. But what he did have and what he did enjoy was making bold, big, decisive decisions and ambition and that kind of excitement that I think sometimes is lacking in our politics at the moment. And, you know, you remember that cliche that you saw ministers come on the airwaves and say almost daily when they were defending Boris, which was, he got the big calls right. You know, yes, but he got the big calls right. And I think, you know, that extends to stuff like Ukraine, the vaccine, and that decisiveness, that kind of, why can't we do more quicker now? Which is a real contrast to the leadership we have at the moment.
Yeah. Of course, the one thing Boris Johnson did brilliantly was he could sell optimism like no one else. And that's not a... I mean, people often would talk about sort of snake oil salesmen, about politicians who can do that. But actually, I think it's it's quite a rare quality. I think it's a really important quality to be able to instill confidence and you know, sunny uplands into the minds of the people that you want to vote for you.
Absolutely, and you forget as well, you know, charisma and identity really can dictate the progress of a government. And I think that's kind of the problem that we have with the Labour government at the moment, is it doesn't have an agenda. People scoffed, you know, in some Conservative circles, but certainly on the Labour benches, about levelling up. Yeah. And they thought, oh, it's just a catchphrase, it doesn't mean anything, whatever. But it gave purpose and identity and direction. And, you know, we just don't have that at the moment. And then that leaves a vacuum. And, you know, as I'm sure we'll go on to discuss, you know, on the world stage. Yeah. You know, you need decisions. You need leadership. You can't just always go, you know, middle management, managerialism. Yeah, it doesn't inspire.
And that's what we've got at the moment, isn't it? I mean, we're going to play the clip a little later on of Mr. Starmer turning on the Christmas tree. You might have heard it, Oscar. I'm not sure, but he does a
Unfortunately, it was painful listening.
Yeah, I don't know how you can mess up a countdown from 5 to 1, but he managed to just make a very exciting moment sound like the last place on planet Earth you wanted to be was outside Downing Street with the Christmas lights going on, which should be the very opposite to that. But he managed to pull it off with aplomb. Made Christmas sound like the dullest thing on the planet at that point. However, he did give his speech, of course, and in that speech he emphasised that the United Kingdom won't kind of prioritise America over the EU or vice versa. Was that a correct move from his point of view?
In fairness, there are a lot of geopolitical, you know, jigsaw pieces completely up in the air at the moment. Before Trump officially takes office in January, we're seeing real weakness and political frailties in, you know, European powers like Germany and France. The war in Ukraine is at an absolutely acute moment in time. And so I can see during his talk last night where he just wanted to tread that middle ground, not make any rash statements or decisions. But again, that is all very well and good in this moment of time, and he can probably get away with that. But let's say there is, you know, a tariff war, for want of a better phrase, between America and the EU. He's going to have to make a decision at that point in terms of how he steers the UK forward. Yeah. And so he's probably got, it's quite symptomatic of him as a leader, I would say, last night. It is, you know, maybe relatively just about right in terms of the ballpark of sentiment, but no detail, no substance, and I think left the room feeling none the wiser as to where we head as a nation on the world stage. Let's not forget, Ian, just very quickly, I think we talked about it last time I was on.
Yes.
Starmer doesn't really like being in the UK that much. He spent 14 visits since he's been PM outside of the nation that voted him in. And a lot of the world leaders and a lot of leadership around the world have briefed out, which is really interesting, this point. They're still none the wiser as to what type of leader he is. And considering he spent so much time out there, for the UK to still not really have a new identity about it, an impact on the world stage is it's not a good place to be.
Not really, is it? And he doesn't sit. I don't know. I don't think he's a natural politician as well. And I didn't have quite as an emphatic a view on that when he was leader of the opposition. But as we all know, there's a huge chasm between just being an MP and being the Prime Minister. Is absolutely vital. Even being a senior cabinet minister and being the Prime Minister, there's a big old gap there, and at the moment he's certainly not filling it. Let's move to this story. Labour could cap political donations to 100,000 quid. This is all reference, Oscar, the Elon Musk story. Apparently wants to give Nigel Farage a squillion quid to bankroll the Reform UK party. Would that be why Labour might cap it, or would they have other reasons why they think this is the right thing to do?
Be a coincidence rather than conspiracy. I mean, without a doubt, the Reform Party are a huge threat to the Labour government. I mean, we talk about charisma and identity and leadership and direction and agenda setting. Reform have got that in absolute bucket loads. So I can see why potentially someone like Elon is looking at Nigel, obviously with the relationship that Nigel has had with Trump for years, and thinking, hang on a minute, maybe that's another area in which I can support. However, I do think it is probably not conspiracy. This is something that Labour, they like to talk about. It's their way of almost virtue signalling in terms of, transparency and how government should be properly done and funded. Yeah. I mean, I as we all know, the Labour Party benefited hugely from, if you like, the market moving away from Rishi and the Conservative Party after 14 years and backing Labour. So I doubt we'll see too much out of this in terms of substantive kind of cleaning up, as Labour would put it, of donations. But the Elon thing is interesting. And even Elon aside, the media commentary, kind of armchair political fans, as I would call them, people who don't pay attention to Westminster every single day of their lives because they actually have a life. I know you and me do as well, Ian. Don't get me wrong.
Sort of.
But they're picking up on that reform momentum as well. And Farage with a bit of wind behind his sails. I mean, if you're Keir Starmer, and in fairness, the Conservative Party, that is something you are really concerned about.
Yeah, absolutely. Worth looking at this story as well. Labour have set up 67 reviews and task forces instead of actually announcing solid policy. Let's set up a review. Let's set up a task force. Let's have a quango. Let's get a committee going. I knew they were going to have a PhD in this territory. I mean, all governments do set up some task forces. This absolutely runs through the DNA of the Labour Party. Let's have another task force. I bet there's more quangos than there were half an hour ago in Whitehall, but that's what they're doing, it seems, Oscar.
Ian, you absolutely nailed it. This is just in the DNA. And I know people might think, oh, well, it's not a huge scandal. Who cares? A few talking shops here, a few talking shops there and quangos. But people need to remember that we pay for this. This is our money that ultimately is used in terms of the salaries, the government time, what should be being done elsewhere. And so that people should be really, really
saying they don't feel what they feel.
Sometimes it is right.
What's being done to Gregg Wallace is a load of old shite. I absolutely think it's bonkers that someone can come up with something that offended them 14 years ago and have a complaint about it today. I'm not saying I don't believe someone. I'm not saying those things didn't happen. I'm not saying they don't feel what they feel. I'm just saying after 14 years, sod off with it. Honestly, if it was just a joke or if it was just words, sod off. Really, sod off. If you're in the media, sod off. I mean, definitely if you're on your, you're a little sweet person at home on your own and you're on your sofa and someone walked into your house and started getting their penis out and making a joke about it, like, oh, look at my cock. Right, okay, fine, that's not okay. But if you're in the media and you work in TV or radio or newspaper or any of the grubby and gruesome industries that I've known so well for 10 years plus, expect frickin' things to be a bit wild sometimes. Expect a guy to make a joke about his knob. I long for the days that people used to make jokes about their knobs. I love the fact that when people see me, they can be shocked by how rude or naughty I am. I've had blokes come to my gigs that do stand up, and they're supposed to be naughty, and they say, Jesus, you know, you throw down the gauntlet, because people have become so polite, damn it. So, Gregg Wallace, if you're listening to this, or if someone sends this to you, I'd just like to say, cheers. I don't think you drink anymore, do you? Aren't you on a bit of a health weirdness? For fuck's sake, just crack open the wine, darling. Grab yourself a sausage roll and a Greg's donut. Grab a glass of wine and come join us at the Katie's Arms, Greg. You're welcome. I don't really care if you got your cock out. I don't really care if you rubbed your cock on someone when you were doing Strictly Come Dancing. I don't really care if you rubbed your cock on Kirsty Walk. I don't give a shit. We all do whatever we've got to do. If they had a complaint, they should have said it at the bloody time. And ultimately, if the rumours were true about whatever, why did they keep inviting you back and having you do every goddamn programme? How do they suddenly decide today's the day you get crucified?
Presses the button and the lights go on. Now, this is a moment where the Prime Minister can be seen as a little bit more human, a little bit more accessible, a bit more fun, you know, away from the troubles of day-to-day prime ministerial life. You're not having to make a big decision. You're not in a cabinet meeting. You're not on the phone to Zelensky. You can just chill out a little bit and make it fun, like a chilled-out entertainer might do. But how many political leaders have it within their DNA to kind of, you know, impart that sort of festive fun thing? Well, this was Keir Starmer's first attempt to be a fun Christmas leader when he turned on the lights outside Number 10. I am going to give a little warning here. For those of you in a nervous disposition, you might want to switch off now and come back in around about 10 seconds' time. For those of you that know the true meaning of the word cringe, you might also want to prepare yourself with maybe some earmuffs or just hide behind a cushion. Here is the Prime Minister going entertainment crazy as he lays it on big time to turn on the Downing Street Christmas lights. Go, Keir.
Could you please join me when I say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1... Yay! It worked. Nervous moment there, but it's all good.
Oh, God. I literally, during that clip, started to eat my own elbows. Oh, 5, 2, 1. Nervous moment there. Oh, everything about it was horrendous. But there we are. The lights are now on. Thank you to Keir. He's a natural. He should go on Britain's Got Talent, shouldn't he, with that? 0344 499 1000. That is where you will find us. This is Talk.
We have actually got a bit of a surprise for you on the Starmer front. Have a look at this.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
That is tremendous. That is absolutely tremendous. I think that could be the best thing we've ever done.
Can you send me that? I want to make that my morning alarm.
Yes,
Though
that's
I might end up
amazing.
going back to sleep is the problem.
Isn't that great?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This one in from Gary. I hope you've recovered, by the way, after the Starmer clip. Gary says, about a year ago, I saw some research where individual states in the United States and the EU had been ranked by GDP per capita. Positions 1 and 2 were taken by Luxembourg and Ireland, largely due to the fact that these two countries are now predominantly tax havens. But once you got beyond them, you had to go down to the 31st place to find the first EU state on the list, which happened to be Denmark. That was squeezed between those economic powerhouses of Louisiana and Oregon. The truth is that the EU is like a clapped-out old trawler that has been swamped by the wake from the economic supertankers of Asia and the US and is slowly sinking. Why would we in the UK want to tether ourselves to that? Well, I tend to agree. I mean, put like that, it's a no-brainer, right? You wouldn't. But what can we get out of the United States? I also wonder whether we're entering another kind of, I don't know, are we entering a kind of moody era of economics and a general downturn, or at best a sort of stagnation in the way we trade, the things we trade? Have we reached peak trading almost? I sense this with the kind of green economy that is sort of emerging. I've felt forever that the real motivator behind the green economy and all that goes with it is to artificially create a new industry in the wake of old industries simply ceasing to exist, either because they're flaked out or they're just no longer required. I can't think of any other reason for the sort of evangelical approach to the green world, trade, commerce and industry. And that's, I don't think that's a conspiracy theory, that's sort of how it feels. I just wonder whether any longer countries will be trading in the same way. The sort of, you know, if you think of the big bang of the 1980s and everything that happened then, and then the countries that have followed. And I know China will be, you know, sitting up laughing, saying, what, you think we're not going to trade? No, I think we're going to trade. But I don't know whether there's going to be some sort of trading bonanza where everybody's, you know, back in the day, in the 80s, when, you know, kids were leaving school, going to work in the city and becoming a multi-millionaire in about 5 minutes. I think all of that, I sense, is kind of, apart from the select few, I wonder whether those days are over. It's a bit of an instinct on my part. I can't really back it up with loads of data, but I sort of sense the flatlining will be the order of the day. And I don't know what that means for individuals, or whether we just sort of recalibrate our expectations. Maybe it's that. Herbie is down in London, who can help us out on stuff here. Where should our affinities be, Herbie? What are you thinking? Hi.
Oh, come on. What chance do we have? Listen, we can't make enemies at this stage of the game. You know, with the world the way it is, Europe in the way it is, that's the last thing we need. We're friends. We're supposed to be friends. We can't choose between one and the other.
Yeah.
You don't have one friend. You have several friends, surely, for God. You know, so to start making enemies now would be the biggest mistake of my life, I should think.
Yeah. That's the last thing we want to do, isn't it? Do you think Starmer was right in that case, Herbie, to say that you don't have to have one or the other?
Well, yeah, you can't pick and choose. You've got to make friends of both parties, of both sides, because we've been friends with them for many, many years. We come out of Europe. I know they didn't like us coming out, but that's beside the point. But we've not made enemies of them. They're still talking to us. They're still doing business with us. The thing is that life's changed. You know, the world changes. Yeah, the world's changed for the worse at the moment. That's the only thing, you know, that's different.
I mean, Trump's position, though, Herbie, is going to be interesting. If you take Trump at his word, his kind of his guiding principle is going to be, you know, we're going to export loads, we're going to import less, and we're going to make our own. You know, everybody sort of agrees with that sentiment. You know, we want people to buy American. We want people to develop and manufacture in America. We want to, you know, get back on track, which is sort of what you hear people say here, isn't it? You know, we want old industries to come back and do that. Now, that's great on paper. No one disagrees with that. But can it be done?
Well, we don't know here. The problem is that Trump is not America. He believes in America. Not like our crowd over here. They're not interested in the UK. We've lost all our good industries and we're paying the price for it. It would be nice to know it's made in the UK, but can we afford to do it? Are we cheap enough to do it? No. Yeah. People do not want to pay high prices for goods that they can get cheaper next door. It's as simple as that. You know, we are human beings and we are all greedy. When it comes to a bargain, we always go for a bargain, don't we?
Of course we do. Of course we do.
That's what it's the name of the game. Trump believes in America. He will do whatever
he does, but he wants to. I sense his biggest battle is with China, right? I mean, China are emerging and they're almost unstoppable. It's just extraordinary that, you know, China was the place that just made plastic crap for years and nothing else, you know, of interest. It was the joke, wasn't it? You know, made in China. It was written on everything, and now anything you're likely to buy at some point has got a sort of Chinese component to it. He's obviously wants to make sure he nips that in the bud. I don't know how successful he can be, but I would imagine, bearing in mind the government bail out industry in China as much as they can and close down, you know, industries that might be a threat to them. Is Elon Musk going to be the sort of man to do that alongside Donald Trump with the car industry? I think Trump's got a lot of big ideas and respectable ones. Yeah, I don't know if he can put it all into action.
The problem is that China is a massive powerhouse. Yeah. It's got a huge population, very intelligent, very knowledgeable. They do things very quickly. I mean, say, they build a road in a week and it takes us about 10 years. I mean, say, there's the difference. And you can see why they're so successful, because they get things done, not like us. We and ah, and we'll have a meeting and we'll have an inquiry and this, that and the other, and nothing ever gets done. And this is why we're in the state that we're in. And Trump has seen that perhaps going over there, and he wants to put a stop to it before it gets too late. We're too late here already. We've already done the damage. It's been done and sealed, and that's it, the end of it. And it never come back. That's the problem.
That is the problem. Well put, Herbie. Thank you, mate. Great to speak again. That's Herbie down in London. Debbie says, more has been made about Gregg Wallace than Louise Hay committing fraud. Why? I find that quite interesting. Well, I mean, there was quite a bit made of Louise Hay at the time, and she got fired. Well, sorry, she resigned. Nobody gets fired. You always resign. But the more you look at that story, it's such a... I mean, had she defrauded HMRC or the mortgage company and all of that, but I you know, when she was in her 20s, she made a moody claim for a mobile phone that turned out wasn't lost after all, or something like that. It wasn't... I kept looking at it going, there must be a bigger bit to this story, and it was a bit... She wasn't even an MP at the time either. So... There wasn't much there. The Wallace thing, I think Debbie's quite right. I've worked in this industry forever. I've never quite known why some stories float to the top and others go by the wayside, or some just have natural ingredients to it. Sometimes a ball starts to roll and what you thought was uninteresting becomes a little bit interesting. And then when it's a little bit interesting and you realise lots of people are talking about it, there's an obligation to talk about it. It's a really mysterious world, even if you speak to experienced editors and you say, why did you make that the front page headline? because they might have started out at the evening with 6 different options for the headline. And it's not always the same criteria that makes the headline. So it's almost like nobody knows, even the people that make the decision don't really know what floats to the top in terms of news. For me, the Gregg Wallace thing is only really interesting in one sense, and that's that if a man is going to lose his job and his career, even though I'm not a fan of Gregg Wallace, and I'm willing to believe he's a bit of a bleep, from what I understand for those who's worked alongside him, and still thinks he's living in the 1970s with Benny Hill's script. I get all of that. I don't want to see anybody lose their career over a perception as distinct from a reality. And so I think the sort of cancel culture thing does play a part in this. If it turns out somebody's done something so awful, then rightly they walk the plank, and nobody would argue against that. That's the bit I've got my eye on. I do wonder whether the BBC, or it's not really, it's on the BBC, it's on in lots of different channels, it's an independent production, but I wonder whether there are more stories bubbling away. Because most of this seems to be about what a bloke said rather than what a bloke did. And I don't know what process is in place to prove or disprove that. But there is a point in the world we currently live in that the more you talk about something, it hits a tipping point. And even if Gregg Wallace turned out to have not really done very much at all, he's probably dead in the water anyway, because it looks like he's a creep and shouldn't be around women in particular. Whatever the rights and wrongs of that are, that's the bit you hit. And that's the funny place we're in. Well, we know you didn't do anything, but lots of people think you did. So, you know, you better go, mate. 0344 499 1000 is where you'll find us. We're talking about trading with the US or the EU. What else have we got going on here? Oh, yes, fast food ads being banned before 9 o'clock. That's very bad stuff because it's making kids really fat. And if you ban the ads, the kids will no longer be fat. That's the theory. It's not true. And cybersecurity. We are vulnerable to cybersecurity. In fact, we're now worse at dealing with cyber attacks than we once were, according to GCHQ. And your comments on that as well. 0344 499 1000. Just gone 2:30. This is Talk.
Najwyższy czas, by ktoś wprost pani powiedział to, co o pani myśli zdecydowana większość Europejczyków. Wybranie pani na stanowisko przewodniczącej Komisji Europejskiej w poprzedniej kadencji było ogromnym błędem i niektórzy do dzisiaj mają kaca po tej decyzji. Jest pani twarzą Europejskiego Zielonego Ładu, który niszczy europejską gospodarkę i rolnictwo, który prowadzi do tego, że z Europy robi się gospodarczy skansen. Jest pani twarzą wszystkich unijnych klimatycznych wariactw, które prowadzą do tego, że my, Europejczycy, stajemy się coraz biedniejsi. Wreszcie jest pani twarzą paktu migracyjnego i zwracam się do pani jak kobieta do kobiety, jak matka do matki. Jak pani nie wstyd promować coś takiego jak pakt migracyjny, który prowadzi do tego, że miliony kobiet w Europie i dzieci czuje się zagrożonych na ulicach swoich własnych miast. Odpowiada pani za każdy gwałt, za każdą napaść, za każdą tragedię spowodowaną napływem nielegalnych imigrantów, bo to pani tych ludzi zaprasza tutaj na teren Europy i za to, co pani robi, powinna pani trafić do więzienia, a nie do Komisji Europejskiej. Pani obecność na stanowisku szefowej Komisji Europejskiej to upadek, dalszy upadek Unii Europejskiej. I wie pani, co myślimy o pani Europejskim Zielonym Ładzie? O to. Wie pani, co myślimy o pakcie migracyjnym? O to. Nawet pani nie patrzy w moją stronę. Wstyd. Chcemy Europy wolnych i suwerennych narodów, a nie chorej lewackiej ideologii. A od Polski ręce precz i wszystkim żołnierzom, którzy w tym momencie bronią wschodniej granicy Unii Europejskiej, powinna się pani kłaniać w pas. Dziękuję.
Now.
To those affected, official figures show 1 in 7 people aged 16 and over have been targeted at least once. Let's speak with Karen Fullerton-Chalmers, Communication Manager at Action Against Stalking. Afternoon to you, Karen.
Hi, Ian. Thanks so much for having me on.
Nice to have you with us as well. I have a friend who went through this, and it went, you know, all the way to court, and it was a reasonably high-profile case as well. Couldn't get any information about the person doing the stalking, which was kind of interesting. And even though newspaper journalists could get the information from the police, the victim couldn't get the information from the police. I mean, what the heck has gone wrong here?
Yeah, I think as well, when it comes to, you know, cyber stalking and it being online, stalkers have so much more anonymity, you know, to weaponise it in that way and to hide behind it. But also it causes the difficulty for the police sometimes in investigating, because it's so easy to make, you know, false accounts. It's so easy to hide behind this. Yeah. And then when a victim doesn't know who their stalker is, it causes that other layer of trauma. You know, who is actually targeting me? Am I getting on the bus with this same person? Yep. Is it someone in my family? Is it an ex? And all these other questions start to arise.
I mean, if you look at, you know, the cesspit that is social media, because it is, yes, we all know there's useful reasons to use social media, but, you know, you just want one person to say to, particularly, say male or female, it's terrible, but I think there are certain specifics around a woman's safety that are worth, you know, highlighting and noting. To get a random message on Facebook or X or wherever saying, I'm watching you, I know your journey to work. Now, it could just be some halfwit who's written that behind an anonymous account. I mean, the ramifications of that person will not go to work the next day without wondering if that person is following them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, tech is part of our life, you know, like how many texts do we send a day? How many phone calls, you know, FaceTime, having the ability to even communicate with you right now this way, you know, where our lives are online. And COVID just, you know, escalated that even further, where we now work from home. That's the new normal. So to then have someone target you through these means that we all use every day, and we use them without thinking, you know, we pick up our phone, it's attached to our arm at all times, and then for someone to then weaponise that can have such detrimental effects on a victim. As you've said, stop people going to work, it can stop people from leaving the house, it can stop people from, you know, reaching out to their lifelines, such as their friends and their family, because their phone has become that weapon, you know, that stalker has utilised in that way.
I mean, it's beyond comprehension that humans would do this to another human, and, you know, do it deliberately and ramp it up, and, you know, when it becomes relentless and you can block people and often people find another way of getting in, etc. What does this new potential new ruling mean then? Victims of online stalking will be able to find out the identity of the abuser. I mean, that's assuming anyone knows the identity of the abuser to start with. So, but once that's been established, what was currently happening that needs changing or is proposed to be changed?
So what was happening was that the police might have known who the stalker was, but the victim being targeted wouldn't. And that's where it's came out of, where someone was being stalked. Many people get stalked, but someone was being stalked and she didn't actually know who her stalker was until it went to court, and then she saw who it was, and her stalker was saying things to her such as, you know, I could smell you when you were on the bus. That's how close they were to her. Wow. And so the police knew who this person was, but she did not. So she had no other means to protect herself from this person. Yep. And we also know that stalkers are obsessed individuals, you know, they're obsessed, they want that contact. So even if you put, you know, different consequences in place, such like throughout the investigation, like restraining orders and so on, some stalkers won't abide by that. You know, they'll breach them to continue to contact someone because they're still hidden behind this mask. You know, the person doesn't know their identity. Whereas if you remove that anonymity of that person, it means that's taken away, they're exposed, they become the vulnerable person, you know, and the power goes back to the victim, you know, to know who this person is that's starting to target them. And then they can, you know, take the safety measures that they need to make sure they're safe.
And you haven't got to be an expert in stalking the digital world to know the logic of what you've just said. I mean, to me, but by definition of this kind of somebody who's trying to get cash out of your bank or something, that won't necessarily be any great as long as they stop doing it. But when it comes to stalking, I mean, the whole deal is that even though the police have information about it, surely
because like you say, there is a logical thing in that, but sometimes we find that the justice system that a lot of the time perpetrators are the ones that are thought about, you know, their rights and, you know, how is this impacting on them, and sometimes the victims can be quite secondary in that. And the whole way to change this, changing laws, recognising, you know, modern stalking such as online behaviours and not just that myth of someone, you know, following someone down an isolated alleyway, which a lot of people still believe is stalking. By then starting to, you know, add these other protections into law, it's good because it's recognition, but it only works as far as it's implemented, you know, like every law. It has to be a standard that's set and has to be followed through. But without adding laws, you still need to try and change the stigma associated with stalking and the awareness that people have round about it for victims to then truly feel safeguarded and protected.
Absolutely spot on. Karen, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate that. Karen Fullerton-Chalmers, who's the communication manager of Action Against Stalking. I mean, I'm going to ask the question whether this has happened to you, male or female, online when you've been... I mean, I suppose in one respect, people call it trolling. So you've been trolled and somebody won't leave you alone. That person that's always there with a snidey comment. You don't know who they are. They're very annoying because they're quite facetious and they just leave a snidey comment hanging. If you do what I do for a living, you sort of get used to this kind of caper. I don't tend to go there. I don't post a lot on social media, really. I might retweet something. And it's a double-edged sword because social media can be brilliant and it can be entertaining and it can be great to seek out areas that you have specifically of interest. I've got a friend of mine who's into Formula One. He only follows F1 accounts, so that would be drivers, race circuits and governing bodies, etc. So he doesn't follow anyone else. So all he gets is like the world's greatest magazine of F1. He's got everything there, loves every bit of it. So that's how he uses social media, and I can see how somebody could do that and find it the most incredible place for information and updates and entertainment, depending on what your area of interest is. But if you're on it more generally, I mean, I see the amount of time people spend... I was looking up somebody the other day who had tweeted more in one day than I had in 1 year. And I thought, how do you do this? How have you got this amount of time on your hands? That was incredible. That's obsessive. You know, you've got to be not just thinking about what you post, and even if you're retweeting, you're still on there all the time, non-stop, almost treating it like a job. I think some of those people think I'll become a social media phenomenon. Maybe there's a bit of that thinking. You know, and some presenters are like that, of course. Thankfully, around here, we're all a bit sane, I'd like to think, or most of us. But if you've been in that place where somebody online has kind of properly spooked you out because of the kind of things they've said and the relentless nature, and I do think, particularly if you're a female, and it's not nice if you're a bloke either, but if you're a female and somebody is saying you know, I saw you on the bus today, and in fact I was so close I could smell your perfume. Now, who's going to not... You're going to go to work the next day thinking about that, right? And then they ramp it up and they keep saying it. And then it takes other forms, and it might take a sort of more sexualised form. It might take a more violent, threatening form. It could just be somebody who won't flipping leave you alone. Who are they? And you block them. That's the thing to do. I'll block them. That'll show them. Oh, they just pop up like an air bubble, right? They pop up somewhere else with a new name. Me again. Couldn't leave you alone. You know, it's that... How do you deal with that? What did it do to you? Because that can... And often I think these things do go away eventually. And most of the time, it comes to nothing. The fact that we live among humans who are willing to do that, even if it's just, well, it was just a joke, well, it's not that funny, really, if you're sending something that could be at least, you know, a little bit threatening, very threatening, violent, sexual, whatever. Just that sense of telling someone else, I'm watching you, basically. So if you've been there and experienced what that feels, in whatever form it was, even if it came to nothing, just, I mean, I'm all ears at this end as to how you dealt with that, but also how that makes you feel. Because it is frustrating if somebody writes something horrible about you. It does, you know, you think, I don't know this person, I've never met this person in my life. But they've just said that. That's not very nice, is it? That's pretty unpleasant. They wouldn't come up to me in a pub and just say that. Why would you put that on there? But when it gets into the sort of sinister area, how have you dealt with that? It's a cesspit, all right? It's social media, but it's with us, and it ain't going away anytime soon. 0344 499 1000. On a lighter note, we've got a brand new Voice of Doom coming next.